Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you how to take some pretty cool screenshots. So normally when I do see screenshots, they look pretty open like this, just sort of what you're seeing right here. I'm in CubePack, I'm in the city of ND on Cube.community. I'll put the IP on the screen if you want to check it out. So if you have integrated graphics, you might not like this step. If you do have integrated graphics, you can still run shaders, but it might not be very well. I was running an old laptop for about 3 or 4 years, and I could just barely run shaders. Like I'd probably 5 or 10 frames per second, but you can still run them. So to get shaders here, you can go to optifine.net and download whatever version of Optifine you need. And then all you do, there's lots of tutorials out there, but essentially you go to your .micro folder and then just drag shaders into the folder. And then all this will appear right here. So if we click on this, I have all my shaders loaded in here. So I'll just scroll through there so you can see which ones I have. So if you do have sort of a low to medium spec PC, usually I recommend either this one here, the BSL, or you can do SUS Renewed as well. But yeah, they're not too bad. You can also change the settings here too. So if you go to options, video settings, shaders, and then shader options right down here, you have this profile right here. So you can change this and you can put it on low if your computer's having a hard time. If you do have a, more medium PC or like, high-end spec PC, you can run the more advanced ones. So I have some here. So you see the SUS PTGI. That one's a pretty high-end one. And then I have the Continuum one right above it. That one is also really, really good. So I'm going to go ahead and load SUS PTGI E12 right here. So once this gets loaded in here, I'll show you around. See, my frames drop quite a bit here. I'll bring up F3. So I'm getting about 30 frames per second. I mean, that's not terrible for, how heavy the shader pack actually is. But I mean, compared to regular gameplay, then yeah. So I'm running an RTX 2060 and I have a Ryzen 5 3600. I want to do an example here where I take a screenshot facing this way. So I'm in Southern Marina on Cube.community. This is the same city that Corellis reviewed, so some of you might be familiar with it. But there's a lot of skyscrapers up that way. So I want to crank my render distance up and see if we can load all that in. But the thing is with render distances and servers as well, they do tend to have a tough time going really, really far distances. So what I need to do, there's an option that I put on the server that makes it go up to 30 chunks just by standing still. But the next part in most screenshots that you're going to want to do, you're going to go to options, video settings, and then you have your render distance. I'm going to crank this up all the way. So with Optifine, you can go all the way up to, well, I have it up to 64. For some reason, in other versions of Optifine, you can only go up to 48. I'm not sure why, but I'm on 1.14 and it lets me go all the way up to 64. Not sure why, but it works. Okay, so we'll do this here. So we can see it slowly loading in. If you use Optifine Zoom as well, just pointing in the direction, it'll load chunks a little bit faster. So see here, zoom in, and then it just goes much, much faster. But before we actually load all this stuff in, we have to change some settings here because every time you change your settings, especially on shaders, it is going to reload all your chunks. So you don't want to load everything in and then try and do it because you're just going to have to restart. So if we go to video settings, shaders, we have a couple of options here. So we have the anti-aliasing here. So we're going to turn some of this on here. So essentially what this does, you can go up to ×2 and ×4. So we're just going to go all the way because I want 3 frames per second. So all this does is it's not super noticeable, but when you look here, you can see it's pretty clean, I guess, aside from obviously the textures because it's a 128 texture pack. All right, so the next options here, you have the render quality and the shadow quality. These both go up to the 2 times as much. So I'm not going to put it up all the way because it really, really makes it intense. I'm going to put that up to 1.5. I'm going to leave that as is because I'm not too concerned with the shadows. If it was more of a close-up shot of just maybe something down there, maybe I'd crank it up. But if we're doing sort of a long distance one, it doesn't really matter. And these here too, with the shader pack, these are very, very soft shadows, so you're not going to get those hard edges. Another thing you can do here, you can go to video settings, you can go back to shaders, and then down to shader options. And this gives you a whole bunch of options here that you can go through. So you have your lighting, you have ray tracing if you have the graphics card for it. You have water options, surface options, post-processing, and atmospheric, and your utility here as well. So this varies by the shader pack. So with the atmosphere here, I actually want to turn these cumulus clouds off. So when you click it, it's not going to do anything. It only updates it when you press done or press escape after you've changed something. So there you go. So those clouds are gone. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and I'm going to load a whole bunch of chunks in and then I will be right back. All right, we are back and I have quite literally 4 frames per second here. Let's check. Yep, 4 frames per second. Okay, so way back here, back in that little gap there are more skyscrapers, but it's just too far to load even with 64 chunks. The next tip here that I can give, right now it still feels like Minecraft. So one of the biggest things I recommend is you go to options and then your FOV here, that stands for field of view. So usually I play somewhere between 80 and 90 usually. You want to make this feel really human scaled. So when you take a picture with a camera, just a normal camera, not any wide angle lens or anything, it has a very low field of view compared to what you would see, you know, in Minecraft. So you're just going to take the slider and you're just going to pull it as far down as you want to, I guess. You know, if you want a little more detail, maybe put it at about 35. But I recommend somewhere between maybe 30 and I'd say maximum 50. Unless you're going for some sort of artistic, you know, shot with the super high field of view. So you can put it down just like that. So make it feel human scaled. You want to feel like you are a part of this screenshot. So the next tip here is view corridors. So I talked about this in my city planning video, but view corridors, essentially you leave a gap of space through an urban area so that you have a focal point. So that's exactly what that gap right there is, going through there. So I do have some screenshots. I'll put one up on the screen right now and you'll see what I'm talking about. So it goes down the road and then you can see all these skyscrapers in the distance. So that screenshot was taken over there, sort of by the base of that white tower right there. But it's a little bit hard to do when you're doing these super high render distance ones and it's not planned out. So usually you're not trying to get screenshots from way down here. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and block right here a little bit. Either that or you can actually Photoshop like a city in or just like real city or something if you want to. I'm not going to do that, but you can. Okay, so I found the spot here. This process, it might take you a little while if your build is super complex. So it doesn't block exactly everything here. We do have a bunch of trees there that sort of give a little bit of depth to the actual screenshot. So we can tell that these trees are a lot closer than those skyscrapers because obviously that tree is not as tall as that building. Yeah, so that's another thing you want to do too. So you want to sort of have a foreground and a background if you really want to have a super complex screenshot. So the foreground here, this is all this tile here and all these stones here as well, and this greenery here. You have a light there and you have some of these trees that are right there. And then you have sort of a mid-ground here with all the boats right there. And then the background there, you have all the towers way back in there. So I'm going to go right here, and then I'm going to change my field of view again. So I'm just going to push this in right all the way into 30. I might go that way a little bit, just so we can get a little bit of that gray skyscraper back that's kind of hiding back there. I don't want to completely block it, but I just want a little bit. So we'll kind of position it like this a little bit because I want the top of the skyscrapers to be pretty close to the top. So if you have shaders with clouds, it's going to look a little more complex on this, but I'd say this looks pretty good. All we're going to do now is we're going to click F2. So since we already have all these chunks loaded, I'm just going to take a couple more. So I'm going to take one right here. Okay, so I moved over here a little bit. We have our foreground with all the boats here. We have our background with the skyscrapers, and the skyline is pretty much filled up here as well. You don't really have any empty view corridors aside from maybe on the far right there. So we'll just take a screenshot. You can see the water moving very slow, but that's part of the process. When you're taking as high quality screenshots as you possibly can, you're usually lagging out your computer. Okay, so I just moved right here because I wanted to get sort of these French buildings in Southern Marina. So we'll do this one, take a screenshot. There we go, and we'll do one last one. Okay, so this is going to be the last position here for the final screenshot. And what I decided to do is I wanted the really warm colors sort of on like the lower half of the screen. So I have the oranges, I have the greens, I have sort of the reds, and then the wood textures on more of the bottom half of the screen. And then the top half, once you get up sort of to the top right, you get those skyscrapers. So that looks really nice. And one last final tip I can give you, if you have easy access to changing the time, I would suggest that you do that. So usually I play on 10 a.m., but you can also change it around a little bit. So if we just do 5 p.m. here, it'll change the time. It's not going to reload it, but it'll do something like this here as well. And you can get these really cool effects, especially maybe if you go at maybe 5:15 in the morning, you get these really, really neat like morning effects. And they look really, really cool. Some of you may recognize the skyline here too. It's the Andean skyline. I actually have a clothing line, the Andean skyline collection, at alpinearch.com. I'll put a link in the description, and I'll put it in the comments as well. I'll pin a comment there. But even if you just want to check it out, maybe, you know, pick up a hoodie or something. It's every single purchase. It helps me out. It supports my content creation, and, you know, helps me break even as well. So that's also a nice thing.